They say when someone leaves, something stays behind. I didn't understand what that meant until the morning Claire zipped her suitcase closed and kissed me goodbye. 10 days. That's what she said it would be. Just 10 days, baby. I need to breathe, to find myself again. The retreat's supposed to be healing. She stood by the front door, barefoot, hair still damp from the shower. Her eyes, those soft hazel mirrors I'd known since college, were already far away. It's women only, she added, as if reading my thoughts. A sacred space. No phones. No distractions. Just the mountains, the elements, and Heron. Heron. That was the name of the guru, part mystic, part therapist, part Instagram celebrity with 1,000 reposts of cryptic quotes beneath filtered sunrise photos. I hadn't paid him much attention before. Claire had followed him for years, quoting his writings about soul alignment and spiritual rebirth. I'd always nodded, supportive but detached. Until now. I think it'll be good for you, I said, trying to sound genuine. Her lips pressed into a small smile. For us, too. I believed her. God help me, I believed her. When her cab pulled away, I stood in the driveway longer than necessary, watching the taillights disappear down our street. The silence in the house was immediate, weighty. Claire's scent still lingered, lavender and something citrusy, on the throw blanket she always wrapped herself in during late-night movies. The days that followed moved slow. I went to work. I ate alone. I watered her plants, opened her side of the closet to inhale a trace of her presence. I missed her. Missed us. But I was hopeful. She left me a note on the fridge, whatever I find out there, I hope it leads me back to you. I clung to that. On the fourth night, I dreamed of her standing on a cliff, arms open wide, calling my name as wind tangled her hair. When I reached for her, she vanished into the light. I woke up breathless, tangled in sheets, her absence pressing into my ribs. By the 9th day, I had the table set for dinner. I cooked her favorite, pasta arrabbiata with too much garlic. I even chilled a bottle of white she loved but always insisted was too sweet. The 10th day came. And went. No call. No message. It wasn't until the 11th day that I got a text, home soon. Just processing. Please don't worry. I tried not to. But something in me shifted. The warmth in her handwriting, the way she used to put a little heart beside her name, gone. When she finally came home, she looked like Claire. But she wasn't. Her skin had a new glow, but her hugs were lukewarm. She wore a flowing linen dress I'd never seen before, beads around her neck, and a distant expression that never quite reached her eyes. She spoke slower, softer, like she was narrating a documentary only she could hear. She smiled, but it didn't curl at the edges like it used to. How was it? I asked gently, desperate to bridge the new chasm between us. She took my hand, held it like a leaf she was afraid to crumple. Transformative. That was the word she kept using. Transformative. Enlightening. Realigning. But every time I looked at her, I saw a stranger walking in my wife's skin. She wouldn't let me hold her at night. She didn't laugh when I showed her our favorite dumb memes. She started meditating every morning in the yard, eyes shut tight, whispering something under her breath, something that didn't sound like prayer. I tried to be patient. Tried to believe that healing wasn't linear. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever she found up there in those mountains wasn't peace. It was something else. Something colder. And it had followed her home. She didn't unpack. That was the first thing I noticed. Her suitcase sat untouched in the corner of our bedroom, half-zipped, like a portal waiting to be reopened. I offered to help, but she just shook her head. Some things need to stay folded a while longer, she said cryptically, adjusting her mala beads and slipping away to the guest room, her meditation space now. She hadn't called it that before the retreat. Claire had always been a little spiritual, Sunday yoga, candlelit baths, the occasional tarot reading during wine nights with her friends, but this was different. Now everything was energy. Everything needed alignment. Including me. You're carrying a dense frequency, she said one night, her voice level as she lit incense that burned like ash and oranges. I can feel it when you enter a room. I laughed, reflexively. She didn't. That night, I watched her fall asleep from across the room. She'd started sleeping on the couch without ever asking. Just said the mattress threw her back out. But I knew the truth. We weren't sleeping apart because of posture. We were sleeping apart because whatever she'd brought home from that retreat was already pulling her away. The intimacy was gone, not just physical, but spiritual. She stopped asking about my day. When I tried to tell her about a problem at work, she held up a hand and said, "That's ego talk, babe. Try observing instead of reacting." I stared at her, stunned, as if she'd slapped me with a proverb. Later that week, I came home early from work. The house was silent except for her voice, low, reverent. I followed the sound to the guest room and found the door cracked open. She sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, her laptop open to a live stream. There he was. Heron. Tall, silver-haired, cloaked in loose cotton robes, speaking to the camera like it was a soul he'd known in a past life. His voice was soothing, seductive. Every word designed to penetrate, never provoke. "I see you," he whispered. "Even when others cannot." Claire repeated the words. I stood there, unseen. She never looked back. The real fracture came a few days later. I woke up in the middle of the night and realized she wasn't in the house. Her phone was gone. Her shoes, too. I waited an hour. Then 2. At 4:07 a.m., the front door clicked open. She entered barefoot, her cheeks flushed, eyes glassy. She didn't look surprised to see me sitting on the stairs. "I went for a walk," she said flatly. "4 in the morning." She shrugged. "Sometimes the night is kinder than the day." My chest ached, but I forced a nod. "You were with him, weren't you?" Her pupils flicked up to meet mine. "Just for a second." Then she turned away. "I don't think you'd understand," she whispered. "Heron, he helped me remember who I am." I was lost. I stood, every cell in my body shaking. "Did you sleep with him?" She didn't answer. That was the answer. My knees nearly buckled, but I stayed upright. "You said it was a women-only retreat." "It was, mostly." "Claire, for God's sake." "Don't," she snapped, eyes suddenly alight with something fierce. "Don't bring your judgment into something sacred. You think this is about intimacy? It's about connection. He awakened parts of me you never touched." That line cut through me like a serrated blade. I watched the woman I had loved for nearly a decade, who once wept when I proposed in the snow, stand in front of me, not with shame, but with devotion, to someone else. To a man who promised enlightenment and took her soul piece by piece. I wanted to scream. To shatter something. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I realized. I wasn't fighting for Claire anymore. I was fighting to unmask the thing that had taken her. She stayed out longer after that night. Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. Every conversation was a monologue. Every shared space, haunted. She moved through the house like a visitor with permission. Her smile was soft, infrequent, and utterly detached. I tried to reach her. God knows I tried. "Let's talk." Not about him. Not about the retreat. "Just us," I said one night, our dinner plates growing cold between us. She looked at me like I'd spoken in a language she'd long forgotten. "There is no us unless you can meet me where I am." "Where is that?" "Higher." The silence after that word was deafening. It echoed inside me like a church bell at a funeral. Later, I sat in the garage with a beer, staring at her car. The back seat still had sand from the retreat, specks of a sacred place I hadn't been invited to. I stared at the grains, wondering if he had touched her there. If she'd cried into his shoulder like she once did into mine. I started checking her laptop, her emails, anything that might help me make sense of the transformation. That's when I found the photos. They weren't explicit, not the kind you confront with a printed copy and a raised voice, but they were intimate in a way that made me sick. Claire, barefoot in the forest, sitting beside Heron at a fire. Claire, leaning her head on his shoulder, both of them wrapped in white cloth. Claire, eyes closed as he cupped her face with both hands, as if he were receiving a divine message through her skin. Each image was a betrayal, not just of body, but of memory. The captions were worse. Releasing wounds through touch. Union beyond the flesh. Sacred sovereignty and surrender. I felt my chest collapse. He wasn't just a man to her. He was a philosophy. She'd given herself not to a fling, but to a doctrine that demanded her devotion, and erased me in the process. That night, I sent a message to the retreat's contact email, posing as a prospective participant. I needed to know where this place was. Who ran it? How I could get in. 2 days later, I received a reply from someone named Sarah, one of Heron's gatekeepers. The tone was airy, inviting. We believe the spirit calls when the soul is ready. If your energy is open, we welcome you. There's a gathering in 3 weeks. Deep in the canyon. It's invitation only. Let us know if you're ready to realign. I told her I was. Not to realign. But to confront. Not to find peace. But to find the men who stole my wife's soul and wore it like a trophy. They told me to come alone. No phone. No camera. No medal. Just intentions, breath, and an open heart. The directions they sent weren't maps, not exactly. More like riddles disguised as guidance. Follow the river until it forks. Look for the twisted cedar. Breathe into the wind. I drove 6 hours into the canyonlands, the sky a bruised lavender overhead. Every mile felt like a shedding, of logic, of comfort, of the life I'd once called mine. By the time I reached the checkpoint, a tattered white flag tied to a tree, I felt like I'd crossed into another dimension. A woman greeted me barefoot, her face painted with clay and ash. You've arrived, she said like it was fate, not GPS. Her name was Unia, and she offered me water infused with moonstone essence and a necklace carved from driftwood. The other attendees were scattered around a wide circle of stones. All dressed in loose whites and tans. Mostly women. Some younger, some older. All silent. Watching. As if they'd already been reprogrammed to observe rather than speak. And then, he arrived. Heron. He moved like someone who expected the earth to make way for him. His white robe flowed with the breeze, his eyes glowing like a campfire just before it dies down. He embraced me without asking, palms on my shoulders, forehead pressed to mine. You've carried pain, he murmured. I said nothing. Let it go here. The first night was all ritual. Singing. Fire. Chanting things in a language that might have been Sanskrit or might have been made up. The air was thick with sage and something sharper, like control disguised as wisdom. Heron led the sessions. He didn't preach. He performed. Stories about his time in the Himalayas. His awakening after 3 days buried in silence beneath a tree. The room swayed to every word like grass bending to wind. He saw everything. That was his magic. He would call someone out without warning. You're holding grief in your womb, he said to one woman. She wept. Your mother abandoned you, he said to another. She collapsed. His guesses weren't always right, but they were close enough to make people doubt their memories. He was a god, or he was a Khan. But either way, he had power. And I knew, without question, that he had touched my wife not only with hands, but with his voice, his story, his presence. When he looked at me that first night, he didn't flinch. He knew who I was. He just didn't know why I was really there. Yet. The second day began before sunrise. We were roused by bells, small, delicate chimes that rang like distant memory. Heron stood at the center of the circle, hands raised toward the still pink sky. Today, he said, we bleed the illusion. We become truth. No one asked what that meant. They just nodded. Breakfast was silent. Oatmeal and herbal tea. No salt. No sugar. We weren't allowed to speak until Heron gave permission. Every gesture, pouring water, lifting a spoon, felt like ceremony. Like proof we could be trusted with our own thoughts. The first teaching was called the mirror of self. We sat in pairs, knees touching, staring into each other's eyes for what must have been an hour. No talking. Just gaze. A woman across from me, her name was Ilsa, maybe 30, with eyes like broken glass, whispered, I see the boy you used to be. He's still begging to be held. She'd never met me. Heron circled the group, laying his hands on shoulders, whispering affirmations: release, reclaim, realign. He stopped behind me once and murmured, "You've carried betrayal in your bloodline. But not your own. Your father." His silence. "You inherited that." I hadn't told anyone about my father. He was quiet. Cold. Died at 56 of a heart attack I still believe was just sorrow with a deadline. And yet, Heron knew. Or guessed. But it felt like knowing. That was the danger. By the third night, my skepticism had started to fray. Not because I believed him, but because I began to see how easy it was to want to believe. He made pain beautiful. He made trauma feel like destiny. And he didn't offer healing. He offered belonging. That's what broke Claire, I realized. Not just the touch. Not the words. But the sense that she was finally seen. Valued. Chosen. That night, we gathered for ritual shadow work. A fire. An offering. And then, the confessions. Each person stood in the center and shared a wound. A truth they'd buried. Ilsa spoke of her abortion at 16. Another woman admitted to stealing from her dying mother. One man wept about hitting his wife 10 years ago. Heron wrapped each of them in cloth afterward. Kissed their foreheads. He never judged. And yet, when I stepped forward, unsure what to say, Heron placed a hand on my chest. "You're here because something was taken from you." I nodded. "She gave herself to me," he said quietly. Not in shame. Not even in defiance. In certainty. Time stopped. Around us, the fire cracked. The wind howled. And all I could do was breathe. "You knew who I was," I said, my voice low. He smiled. He smiled, not kindly, not cruelly. It was the smile of someone who already believed he had won, and no longer needed to convince anyone. "I knew," he said, removing his hand from my chest. "From the moment I saw you. You didn't come to seek. You came to reclaim." The circle around us fell into stillness. No one looked away. No one intervened. This was an arena. And he'd made it that way. I stood at its center, bare, not in body, but in truth. "You took her," I breathed. The words came out softer than I intended, but they were honest. "You slipped into the fractures I didn't know I'd left open." He nodded, as if agreeing. As if that was fair. "I showed her what you were afraid to reveal in yourself," he said. Sadness. Doubt. Desperation. I didn't steal. I simply didn't hide. "You manipulated her," I said, stepping closer. My legs trembled, but I wouldn't let them fold. "You didn't give her freedom, you gave her a reason to run." This isn't awakening. It's captivity dressed in ritual and incense. The fire cracked. Someone exhaled sharply behind me. For the first time, he looked at me, not as a teacher, not as a performer. As a man. "Do you want her back?" he asked. I hesitated. Because I didn't know. Because the question didn't feel like a choice, it felt like a sentence. "You want to reclaim a woman who's already dead to the version of your life you still worship," he went on. "She won't go back to the script. The dinners. The gentle arguments over who left the hallway light on. She awakened. And yes, with me. But not for me. For herself. Something in me cracked. Not because he was lying. But because maybe he wasn't. And still, I hadn't come for justice. Or forgiveness. I had come for the right to my grief. The kind he tried to repackage as growth. I turned and walked out of the circle. No one followed. But his voice called after me, soft and deliberate. "If you want to know what's left of her, go to the white tent. Ask for Sarah. She knows." I didn't look back. But I remembered. Because somehow, despite everything, hope still flickered inside me. Not for reunion. For clarity, of what I'd truly lost. The path to the white tent was marked not by signs but by silence. Even the trees seemed quieter as I approached, their branches still despite the wind that had haunted the rest of the retreat. It sat at the edge of the clearing, slightly raised on a slope, moonlight catching the fabric and making it glow like bone under skin. Sarah met me at the threshold. No smile. No surprise. Just a quiet nod, like she'd been waiting. "You came," she said. "I was told you know where Claire is." She studied me, not just my face, but my posture, my breath. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." The inside smelled of eucalyptus and rain. Pillows lined the floor. Bowls of water flickered with candlelight. And in the center, an altar, simple, elegant. A single photo of heron, flanked by dried sage and stones shaped like teardrops. Sarah sat, motioned for me to do the same. I did, though every part of me was tense, coiled. "She's not yours anymore," she said gently. "But you know that." "I'm not here to drag her home," I replied. "I'm here to understand what you all did to her." She tilted her head. "We didn't do anything. We offered truth." She chose to listen. "Truth," I repeated. "That's what you call it when a woman disappears into someone else's voice. When she forgets her own life. Her marriage. Her name." "She didn't forget," Sarah said. "She shed." I stood. Pacing now. The tight space made it feel like my thoughts echoed louder than they should. "You treat her like a symbol. Like a butterfly pinned in a glass box. But she's a person. With a home. With history. She had a life before this place." Sarah rose too. "She still has a life. Just not the one you want her to return to." I turned to her, my voice breaking despite me. "Did she love him?" "She believed she did," Sarah answered. "Maybe she still does. But love here, it's not what you think it is. It's not possession. It's not security. It's not obligation wrapped in affection. It's not reality," I muttered. She walked to a basket in the corner, retrieved something. A folded piece of fabric. "She left this," she said, holding it out. I took it. It was Claire's scarf. Soft, blue, still smelling faintly of lavender and something sharper. There was a note tucked inside. My hands shook as I unfolded it. "If you're reading this, I know you came. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the silence, the absence, the ache. But not for the truth. Not for the part of me I buried to keep our life running smoothly. Heron didn't steal me. He reminded me. I tried to bring that home, but the gap between who I became and who I was, it was too wide. Maybe one day you'll understand. Until then, know this wasn't about leaving you. It was about returning to myself." My vision blurred. It wasn't the apology I needed. But it was the truth I had come for. Sarah placed a hand on my shoulder. "You can stay the night here. Then leave in the morning." I didn't respond. I sat there, Claire's scarf in my lap, the words echoing in my chest like thunder with nowhere to go. She was gone. Not taken. Not kidnapped. Gone by choice. And maybe the worst part was realizing that choice had nothing to do with me. I left before sunrise. The canyon felt different in the early light, less sacred, more silent. Like the spell had lifted just enough to show the bones beneath the ritual. I passed the circle of stones where we'd chanted 2 nights before. The fire had died. Nothing but ash now. People moved through the clearing like ghosts in linen. No one stopped me. I don't think they saw me anymore. The drive home was long. Quiet. I didn't put on music. I didn't call anyone. Just drove, letting the road unwind the tension in my shoulders inch by inch. At a gas station 3 hours out, I sat in the parking lot and held Claire's scarf. Pressed it to my face. Tried to remember the last time she wore it. I couldn't. The house was still ours, technically. But it felt hollow now, like a stage after the actors have gone home. The bed was made, untouched since the night she left for the retreat. Her side of the closet was half empty. She'd come back, packed more things, and never said a word. Her plants had died. I hadn't noticed. I didn't cry that night. I just sat on the kitchen floor, back against the fridge, staring at the magnet that still held up the note she left me before the retreat. Whatever I find out there, I hope it leads me back to you. It didn't. Weeks passed. I told people she was away on a sabbatical. That we needed space. That she was figuring things out. No one asked too many questions. That's the thing about a slow unraveling, people get used to it. They don't notice the silence until it's been around long enough to feel like furniture. One night, I finally logged back into the retreat's website. The homepage had changed. A new image of Heron, standing atop a cliff, arms open to the sky. The caption read, "To lose yourself is to begin again. We welcome all returns." Claire wasn't in any of the photos anymore. It was like she'd been erased from the mythology, absorbed into the teachings. A name whispered for a time, then faded into the next narrative. And I began again, too. But not the way Heron meant. I sold the house. Moved to a small apartment across the city. Took up running. Started therapy. Wrote a letter I never sent, addressed to Claire, filled with things I wish I'd said before the retreat, before Heron, before the unraveling. Some nights I still hear her laugh in my dreams. Not the new one. Not the breathy, slow smile she wore after the retreat. The old one. The one that used to burst out mid-conversation, mid-sentence, sudden, unfiltered, real. I wake up smiling sometimes. Other times, I wake up hollow. Healing isn't linear. It loops. It stings. It whispers questions you thought you buried. But over time, I stopped needing answers. Some stories don't end with closure. Some end with departure. And in that empty space, you rebuild. Not to forget, but to remember who you are. When no one is watching.